Welcome back to our discussion on ecological referencing presented by the Plant Symposium. In part one, we explored the foundational aspects of ecological referencing shapes professional practices and the passion behind native plants. Now, in part two, we'll delve deeper into how the industry can better support the right plant, right place philosophy and strategies for communicating the value of ecological referencing for those less familiar with the topic. We'll also share some inspiring ways to generate excitement about sustainable horticulture and highlight a notable success story from our panelists that exemplifies the impact of these principles. Get ready for more insights and practical advice as we continue our journeys through this vital subject. Let's discuss how you'd like to see the industry support the idea of the right plant, right place from an ecological perspective. Sarah?
I think the industry is, as Sean has said, is trying very hard, and a lot of people are working very hard on trying to change maybe the lens of what is landscaping all about and what is it for. And I think we're trying, obviously, to move away from an aesthetic only, I'll say only basis, because obviously I agree with Sean, aesthetics are still important. But now it's, much more of an all-encompassing. Of course, we want our landscapes to look nice, but we also have to think about, the ecological value of it. And as Jonas said, a lot of this starts with kind of education and awareness. So I think I really agree with Jonas's comments about, a lot of municipalities and nonprofit organizations are doing a really wonderful job of kind of lifting up the collective knowledge and the general public's knowledge on education and awareness. And I think this is a really, really crucial aspect because, 20, 30 years ago, if you said, oh, we should be putting in, a native plants or a pollinator patch, I think I would have heard a lot of comments about bees. Oh, bees. And now I think that conversation is very different when you talk to your clients, where now it's framed differently and people understand the importance of bees and other pollinators within, a whole complex web. So I think that education and awareness is really important. I think the industry, and I really like the work that's being done with the Canadian Coalition of Invasive Plant Regulation. Kathy Kafalis is doing a wonderful job, I think, of trying to think about, kind of almost like leveling the playing field. So, if Jonas, for example, is no longer selling periwinkle or never has sold periwinkle, right? But they can go down the street and get periwinkle somewhere else. It's not really a level playing field for all of the individuals that are selling plants. But if the Canadian Coalition of Invasive Plant Regulations are to get their way with what they want to have regulated, it basically just kind of eliminates a huge portion of difficult conversations, which I think makes it easier on all of us if we then have, a much better palette of plants that are more ecologically focused to work with. I think that is really good. And I think, continuing to have public engagement and outreach and meeting people where they're at and having, signs of pollinator-friendly gardens or rain gardens and trying to educate the public on what these plants are doing and why they've been put in certain places, I think is really important. Because I think, again, if you're not in this industry, if you're something else and you don't think about these things like we're thinking about this every single day, all day long, I think it's good for you to, have these conversations are in your periphery as you're going about your day-to-day lives, and you're, maybe going to a schoolyard or you're maybe going to a community center and you're seeing, a demonstration of what could be done and what is possible. And then I think it just broadens your own individual perspective, and perhaps you want that maybe for your own yard, or talk about these things or the importance of certain plants in our landscapes.
Smiling. I think you got something to add to this conversation.
Well, lots. Yeah, I agree with everything Sarah said, and I think we need to leverage. I like that idea, the work that's being done, and to speak to Jonas's point as well, by other groups. I'm a member of the Master Gardeners of Ontario. Again, I think that our trade needs to be more open to that idea. They don't know less. I think we need to be less judgy. So many ecological minded people from our trade and beyond yell at people. That's the impression that people get. I do a lot of public speaking, and when I say I have plants in my garden other than native plants, I like plants. I look at the math on each plant. Does it support pollinators? Is it just a plastic plant, as Ptolemy said about hostas, which I like? Um, the whole room just goes, ah, because they were all ready for a speaker that was going to yell at them about, you're not doing enough. And I think that's a mistake on our part as gardeners and environmentalists. Um, I think that we need to tie in as many different, I'm a big fan of synergy, tie in as many different threads as we can on every issue. I think that builds our reputation from a selfish point of view. I think it builds our business and can be used as advertising from a selfish point of view. And I think gardeners deserve capes. I think that we need to realize how much we can do with the knowledge that we have in the palette that's available to us by helping people understand everything that they can do with their yard to fix all the problems in the world, from street crime. Street crime goes down when there are gardens in a neighborhood in a public way, to save the bees, save the monarchs, that old chestnut again. And I think that the knowledge that we have can put us in a leadership role instead of a following role. And I think that's what we need to try and focus on. And many of us are. I think it's come a long, long way from, maybe just some of us being the crazy person in the room. People are really gravitating toward what we can do and that message.
I agree 100%, Sean. Rick, do you have some thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I do actually. I'd like to augment what Sarah said, because the whole invasive species thing is one of my bugaboos. And I've been really fortunate lately. After the book has come out, I've been invited to do a lot of talks. And recently they've been at garden centers. So I've been invited to garden centers both here and across the border in the US. And what I do first when I walk through is I tend to look, where's your native plant selection first? And while I'm going, I start to look for all the invasive species that they still have on their shelves. And so I point that out when I'm giving a talk to the staff and the others that have shown up to hear the talk. And so it's been, for me, it's all about education. And the right plant, the right place means get rid of the wrong plants. And so, as Sarah said, there's lots of good work being done now to make people aware. I mean, we've had the Plant Me Instead brochures for quite some time. In my opinion, they don't get nearly enough focus. It's always been, oh, well, you might want to look at this. We haven't emphasized that there are better plants for the location, that do more for the environment, that aren't invasive, and so on. So we need to educate people, and we need to educate the people who are selling the plants to the gardeners. So to me, that's a huge start. If we can get the garden centers eliminating the incorrect plants and making more readily available the right ones, then we're well on our way. Because if Joe Gardner, me, goes in and I see this beautiful burning bush or Japanese knotweed or something that's still being sold, then oh, that's lovely. And when the garden center person says, yes, you can plant this here in your garden, well, we're not getting the right plant at all in those cases. And there was something else that I was thinking of while I was talking, but it's gone now. But yeah, to me, it's educating both the suppliers and the general public and making that information more readily available.
I agree 100%, Rick. It is, I think, really all about educating. But please don't tell me that you've seen Japanese knotweed for sale in the nursery. That would just make me cry.
Not for a while, but I have seen. What's the thorny Japanese shrub that's the tick haven?
Barberry. Japanese barberry.
Yeah, I have seen that recently. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it'll take time to change, but we're on the right path. Jonas, what are your thoughts on this question?
Okay, so for in terms of what the industry could be doing, first of all, I want to say this, I really feel like this is an incredible opportunity to sort of rewrite the catalog. I'm thinking of specifically things like lawn alternatives. Like, wouldn't it be incredible if the industry came up with a sod that was using native grasses or strawberry or pussy toes or something like that? Um, and I think that there are plenty of ways that we could change the format of the way we grow things to make them more economical. I'm thinking about um, that sod idea. And then if we're talking about like shifting underlying values, where we're appreciating function, that's going to actually change how we produce plants also. So for example, if we're interested in resilience as an important thing, then we want to have genetics, good genetics, robust genetics in our plants. And a lot of the plant production that we do is cultivars. It could be asexual reproduction, so that we have identical plants with identical genetics. So that's going to really be a sea change for growers who can produce large amounts of plants uniformly at a good price using these types of techniques. Where if the market switches to want more resilience, more genetic diversity, they're going to have to modify the way they grow things, or just go back to the old way of growing things, like doing things from seed and other ways. So that's a big challenge, because obviously it takes a long time to change your production practices. You still need to ensure that what you're doing is still going to produce a high quality plant. So that's a big challenge. On the design side, I think where the industry or the profession needs to look at, like, when you design something, you're building into it all of the maintenance and the costs and the emissions and the inputs into that landscape. And I would love to see more designers think about, what's going to happen in terms of the emissions. Say if I put a lawn here as opposed to something else, or if I put or in the example, like another example that's a good example is like a lot of these very complex meadow type landscapes that are becoming very popular with Pete Udoff and that kind of thing. I mean, I'm not 100% sure that our profession knows how to maintain those landscapes, as opposed to the thousands and thousands of acres of lawn where we have like that built-in cultural knowledge of cutting and fertilizing and mowing and watering and all that. I think that there's a gap there on the design side of realizing how these more complex designs are going to be maintained, and then also if they're going to produce sort of more static landscape, that's more traditional, then what are the implications in terms of emissions and inputs, fertilizers and things like that. So I think there's a couple of things there where I think designers need to do more, and then maintenance also. This is actually a great opportunity for maintenance to sort of value add, as far as being able to charge more for their knowledge, for those of us who are comfortable going into a complex planting and doing maintenance, as opposed to. So that would be an opportunity there as well. But it's a big challenge. I've heard landscape architects say, well, we planted this meadow, and then we get the contractor comes in and they just know how to deal with grass, and they don't know how to deal with these more complicated perennial plantings. Okay, and then last point is garden centers. I think that this is an interesting one where we could encourage garden centers to reorganize their offerings based on the ecological reference in the right section. So if we sell our plants, we have a woodland understory section. So if somebody comes in, they say they have a big tree, we send them over there. Now, even within that section, there's going to be variation in different light requirements or water requirements or soil requirements, but at least they're in the right place so that they have the opportunity to buy a plant that will work well for their space. And I think that would be an interesting way of organizing the plants at the garden centers. But my sort of overall thing that I think that the industry needs to do is, how are we going to ramp up supply and still have genetic diversity in our plants? And so I've been doing some work with seed orchards and stuff like that to try to make these plants and species more available to landscape professionals. And I think that there's going to be a whole lot of collaboration that needs to be done in this regard, both on how to do it and then also like sharing resources, because it's really time consuming. It's not a money making part of the business, and therefore it needs to be supported by the industry, potentially by government and educational institutions and nonprofits. If it's really critical, I'll leave it with this. If it's so important, insert expletive here, then why aren't we supporting it financially the way it needs to be, right? So I think that everyone is somewhat culpable in that we haven't done enough, in my view, as far as I don't think the government, they talk big talk, but they haven't put the money up the way they should. And then industry also is going to have to bear some of this research cost. But the nonprofits, again, they could do more there also. I think there's a whole collaboration piece that needs to happen in order for these new techniques and new species to be offered. So I'll leave it with that.
All right, thank you, Jonas. You brought up 2 points that really hit home with me. One is the availability of these plants. And because it's becoming more popular now, it's becoming more difficult to get a lot of these things. In the maintenance, I see so many companies out there who are maintaining landscapes who have no clue what they're doing. It's almost embarrassing. But we'll stop there. Okay, I want you to share with the group one win you've had, either working with the public, working in a garden, or designing a landscape that you're proud of, and that kind of relates to our discussion. And let's start with Sean.
Hey, you skipped the how do we inspire joy question. Oh,
We're going to get there.
By the way, excellent work putting all this together. It's thought-provoking for us, so hopefully it is for people watching as well. There are so many stories of how good things are being done. I work with some eco groups like Ontario Green to create, for instance, we created a butterfly garden down in Beamsville, and it's pretty big. It's pretty massive, actually. And the process has been going on for a while, and we made sure that we're the ones maintaining it for the first few years. We have volunteers that come in and I supervise and teach. What's really interesting is the passersby are saying things like, what are you using as host plants here? Good heavens, that's a deep end of the pool question for the general citizenry. People are driving by in their scooters and carts and walking their dogs and so on, and they're saying, this is really beautiful. It's nice to see something like this being done. To a very great degree, the sales have been successful, and I think all of life is sales. I think we need to understand that more. Very often to us, these ideas are self-evidently good, but it's not true. When you have a good idea, you got to pitch it. You got to make it the way it wants to be. You have to give people permission to do it, and you have to reward the people through social media, for instance, that are doing a good job. And I do my best to do that. Pretty much everywhere I go, people are trying to incorporate some aspect of eco into their yard. And remember that there's no one solution. We're talking about native plants today. Great. What about edible plants and food security? What about rainwater handling and things like permeable paving and rain gardens, one of my own personal loves. There's no one big lever to fix things. What we're talking about can easily skate into the urban heat island effect and planting native trees, planting trees in general, planting non-invasive trees specifically. But there's so many things that we can do, but I think that we can miss the many little pictures by looking at what we conceive to be the big picture. And people are working to that end. Everybody's got their focus. Kathy Kavaslis and the Coalition for Invasive Species is phenomenal. I just love what they're doing and how they're doing it and getting the word out. Look at Lorraine Johnson's book. Rick and Sean's book is wonderful. It's literally by my bedside right now. And the information, the depth of information, and people are looking for that, and that inspires me. That's it's those things that make my world go round every day.
Awesome. Rick.
I use this story just about every time I give a talk, and that is that about 10 or 12 years ago, I was showing a good friend my native plant garden, and she comes from a Dutch background. She had beautiful flower gardens, not a single native in it, but extensive gardens. And she was blown away by the fact that we counted at least a dozen different species of bees just on one small patch of wild bergamot. And so she took some home with her. Fast forward about 6 years, and I actually got a native plant from her that I didn't have in my garden because she had started to go down that path. Well, 2 years ago, she just converted her whole 95-acre farm into all native species, put a wetland in. She has breeding bobolinks and others on her property now. And so she just went whole hog and turned the whole farm native. She still has a few non-natives, but they're the exception now. So
That's incredible.
To me, that was the biggest win of all.
You said 95 acres?
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Sarah, a big win for you?
Well, I'll share a win recently that is actually from my own garden. I was completely sucked in because of social media, of course, that they were showing me pictures of their pearly everlasting plants just covered in butterflies, and I thought, wow, I have to have that. And my husband's like, where are we going to fit more plants? But you can always fit more plants in your garden. So we went out and I took my son and my daughter, and we got 3 pearly everlastings. We put them in the yard, and just, it's kind of like a wait and see what's going to happen. And it's it's just unbelievable. Within a few days, these pearly everlastings are completely, covered in, the caterpillars for the American lady and painted lady. I was like using iNaturalist to ID them, making sure, what are these caterpillars? And of course, lo and behold, they ate, all of the leaves of the pearly everlasting. And I was kind of watching it go down. And so then, of course, I was panicking because I'm thinking they're going to run out of food. Had to go get more, but even more in my garden. And it's amazing, I'm putting plants, let's say 3 feet away, maybe from where the original little clump was. And overnight, the caterpillars all found the other new pearly everlasting plants and then started to eat all of those. Just unbelievably incredible. And now my original pearly everlastings are starting to regrow their leaves again, like they completely have survived. It was just an incredible thing. And my kid, I think the big win is that my kids now see that. And they, would run out into the garden in the morning and look for the caterpillars and then come back and tell me how many caterpillars are on those plants. I just think that's like the most amazing, learning lesson. And I was telling this lesson to some other people, and they were like, you're happy that your plants have been eaten, was kind of the phrase back that I was getting. And I was like, I'm ecstatic that my plants have been eaten, because this means that we're going to have butterflies. If those plants weren't there, what would have happened? And it kind of just has caught a few people just in my day-to-day life, a little bit off guard or maybe by surprise, because this isn't in their, day-to-day conversation. So I feel like that was it's a small win, but it was a win that I think my kids have been talking about this with their friends, and hopefully that is like spreading some of that, infectious joy.
That's awesome. I think it really is. We need to inspire youth to grab hold of this because they're the ones that are going to inherit the planet from us, right? So I think it's some critical. Jonas, do you have a win that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about this before, but part of the fun part that I kind of put a feather in my cap or sort of feel is a success is like how much engaging with the industry, how great that's been as a process. So a few years ago, first year of COVID, we had a meeting with stakeholders about a seed strategy for Toronto, and we had a bunch of people come from various parts of the industry, whether it was nonprofit, academic, indigenous, private contractors like myself, growers, and some native plant growers. And after the meeting, MVK, they're sort of one of the bigger independent growers, said, hey, we've got a field. If you guys want to do this seed orchard idea, I mean, we can't grow trees in it right now. So if you want to do something here. And I was really excited about the prospect of working with them. I've been a customer of them for years, for decades, actually. But the idea that a sort of conventional grower, a grower that grows it all, would be interested in having a seed orchard and farming for seed really excited me, because I live in a world where I don't think we get this thing done without the conventional growers and without the mainstream industry buying in, because they have resources, they have workers, they have greenhouses, they have propagation and everything that they need to be able to do this at scale. So I was really excited about the prospect of working with them on this, and it's turned into this wonderful project where we have a bunch of different volunteers from various parts of the industry, including landscape designers and architects and students from the local university, and we've gotten some funding also from nonprofits as well. And so what we ended up with, 3 years later, we're up around 60 species there. It's a little less than an acre, and we're growing 50 to 100 individual plants of each species. And we harvested, I think it was on the order of 26 kilograms of clean seed over 50 species. So that kind of collaboration is kind of what I was talking about. And it's exciting to me that if somebody in the industry who lives in the neighborhood wanted to do a project and doesn't think they can get, the quantity that they need, they can come and say, hey, give me, 1,000 seeds of this, or, 10 grams of that. And they'll be able to take it to their favorite grower and say, hey, grow me this. I need this for my project next year. And so changing making it more accessible for people to use native plants in the project is actually, I think, a bit of the grease in the wheel that we need here. And it's been enormously satisfying just in the relationships and working with different people from different parts of horticulture to do a project like that, because we never could have done it on our own, to be honest. There's been maybe 100 people have touched that project over the past couple of years. So I'm really proud of that one.
And I think you should be too. I firmly believe that the best things happen when we work collaboratively, that nobody's an island. When we work together, we are much stronger. Thank you for tuning in to part 2 of our discussion. We hope you found the conversation both informative and motivating. Be sure to catch the final segment of our series, where we'll continue the conversation and share some valuable resources for further learning. Your engagement with these ideas is essential in fostering a more sustainable, informed horticultural community. Stay connected, keep exploring, and let's continue working towards a greener future together.